What is going on, guys? Welcome to another video on my channel, HAIRLICIOUSLY. I know it's been forever since my last update and I apologize. I was on a cruise to the Bahamas with the in-laws for the first time and had a lot of fun. And I was also a little bit sick due to some issues with the flu. So that's out of the way and I'm here back with another video for you guys. I also did get my car finally. It's sitting in the garage, but it's raining right now and I still need to get the state inspection and the smog check and also go to the DMV. And once everything's done and over with, I will go ahead and show you guys what I got. And I also bought a lot of car parts, so I'm going to be installing a lot of the stuff on there. And so please stay tuned and I will go ahead and show you guys the vehicle shortly. But today I wanted to actually talk about something in this video which I've already covered in a lot of my prior videos. I wanted to talk about the importance of getting a hair transplant and the importance of taking hair loss medications such as Finasteride, minoxidil, anything that can help supplement and improve and slow down further hair loss. If you guys are new to this channel, I've actually had 1,700 grafts via FUE in South Korea in November of 2016. So it's been, over 2 years since my last hair transplant. And I've been taking 1 milligram of Finasteride per day for the past 2 years now. And I've also been using minoxidil and DERMA rolling to slow down further hair loss in the frontal hairline. So as you guys can see, this is how it looks unedited. There's no gel, there's no any powders to create an illusion of a fuller set of hair. There's no SMP. And there's nothing like that. So this is how it looks straight out of the shower. As you guys can see, you guys can kind of see the thinness in the frontal hairline. And this is why I will be getting a second hair transplant sometime next year in April or May in South Korea. Many people are under the misconception that if you've had a hair transplant, you're completely cured 100% from further hair loss and that you're not going to have any treatments that's going to be necessary to, slow down further hair loss. That is wrong because just because you've had a hair transplant, the native hairs behind it, so in my case, the hairs behind the implanted areas are still going to be prone to male pattern baldness. And so even those people who've actually had a hair transplant, including myself, you guys are still going to need maintenance. And you guys are strongly advised and recommended by most hair transplant doctors to end up taking hair loss medications to slow down further recession. Even those who are not suffering from male pattern baldness eventually are going to lose some of their hair. Follicles that does produce hair, they're not going to be as productive as they were when you guys were younger. And a good example can be somebody like our 40th president. We have Ronald Reagan, who has maintained a full set of hair even until he passed away in his 90s. But over the years, he too lost hair. It just wasn't as noticeable as somebody suffering from male pattern baldness. When you're suffering from male pattern baldness, hair loss is going to be a lot more noticeable. But like I said, as you guys age, our body just tends to deteriorate and everything just doesn't work as it used to be. It's not as productive. And that's why we are going to continue to suffer from hair loss. One thing that I would recommend, and obviously I'm not a doctor, so you guys take it with a grain of salt. But from my experience, if you guys are suffering from hair loss at a younger age, and by younger age, I mean, if you guys are like 35 years and younger, I would highly recommend and advise you guys to be on hair loss medication, such as Finasteride and minoxidil for at least a few months prior to getting a hair transplant. I would have actually been on hair loss medication for about a year prior to my hair transplant, had I had more information. And this is solely so that I want to see if I can actually treat hair loss just through medication. And a lot of people have been very successful in slowing down and even possibly reversing hair loss just through medication alone. And so they really didn't even require a hair transplant. Now, if you've receded to the point where, hair medication is not going to be a solution, then you might look into hair transplants. But if you, like in my case, I don't think I really needed a hair transplant. I probably could have just been on medication to slow down for their hair loss. I really didn't have that severe form of a recession on the temples. I was just naturally born with a high forehead, and I did have, temporal recessions here. But I know that there's a lot of people that do suffer from a more severe form of hair loss, and I'm fortunate to, not be in that position. So I would recommend hair loss medication, especially, like I said, if you guys are suffering from hair loss at an earlier age, just because if you're suffering from hair loss at an earlier age, there's a good possibility that you guys are going to suffer from a more severe form of hair loss later down the road, which in turn means that you're going to end up losing more hair at an earlier age versus somebody who let's say you're in your 40s, you're a Norwood 3, and you still have a good set of hair. You're most likely not going to go from a Norwood 3 to a Norwood 7, although it's possible. But if you were, let's say, 20 years old and you're already like a Norwood 4 diffuse, where you have suffered from a lot of hair loss in your earlier years, and I've even seen people in their teens where they're 16 years old, where they're suffering from, like a Norwood 4, those people are most likely going to suffer from a severe form of hair loss later down the road, just because they've suffered from hair loss at an earlier age. And so one other reason why you want to be on hair loss medication, other than the fact that you want to slow down hair loss, is also the fact that you want to reduce something known as shock loss. Shock loss in terms of a hair transplant is basically trauma that's caused from the extraction and the implantation of the grafts, and that results in hair to fall out. Usually this is temporary, but it can also end up being permanent. So this happens for several reasons. Number one, it can happen because you already have thinning areas on the scalp, which are predestined to fall out. So no matter what you do, they're still going to fall out eventually. But the fact that a hair transplant causes that extra trauma is going to help accelerate that hair loss. Like I said, this can also be permanent in terms of hair loss due to shock loss. And this is because the hairs, so they're already affected by DHT, which means that you already have male pattern baldness and it's going to fall out eventually. And as a result, taking finasteride and minoxidil and other forms of hair loss medications to reduce the chances of shock loss is actually something that may benefit you in the long run. I was actually able to find a clip of somebody who had undergone a hair transplant with Dr. Umar. He's out in California. The patient did not end up taking finasteride after a hair transplant. And he ended up with progressive hair loss as a result. The areas behind the implanted areas on his hairline. And like I said, if you don't take hair loss medication, there's a good chance areas where you've actually not had a hair transplant, aka your native hairs, are still going to be prone to hair loss. So I was actually rather surprised to find out that a lot of people who undergone a hair transplant don't end up taking hair loss medication. I've spoken with several doctors, and there's a lot of patients that decide not to take finasteride for whatever reason. If you don't take any preventative measure, even after a hair transplant, it's really going to be, it's going to defeat the purpose of getting a hair transplant. So if you guys check out this clip here, this guy was a Norwood 3 at the young age of 26 when he had his first hair transplant. He ended up getting a pretty aggressive hairline. As you guys can see, he ended up using 3,200 grafts via FUE. And the thing is, this video was what kind of triggered me a couple years back to actually get a hair transplant. I saw Dr. Umar's result, and obviously it's very aggressive. The result looks pretty natural after 9 months, but since he did not take finasteride, we fast forward to 8 years later, and you guys can see how the implanted hairline is still there, but the area behind it, he has lost a lot of density, and you guys can actually see through the scalp. I'm about 99% sure that had this guy been on finasteride and even minoxidil, he probably would have been able to slow down and maintain his current hair loss 8 years ago. But since he did not take any finasteride or dutasteride or minoxidil or any type of hair loss medication for the past 8 years after getting a hair transplant, you guys can see the effects of further hair loss and progressive hair loss even after a hair transplant. You're literally wasting your money if you don't take hair loss medication, and it really kind of defeats the purpose of getting a hair transplant. Unless you just want to lower your hairline, you're not suffering from any, male pattern baldness. But I mean, if you do end up getting a hair transplant, it really defeats the purpose of not taking, hair loss medication, especially if you're not suffering from any side effects. Now, if you guys are suffering from side effects, I do understand. And this is why you really do need to consult with a hair transplant doctor or an endocrinologist to check your hormone levels to see how it affects your body, because everybody reacts to different types of drugs, differently. You guys always want to consult with a doctor, and the best thing to do is to, if you guys do want to end up trying finasteride, you don't have to take 1 milligram of finasteride per day for it to be effective. Although it's going to lower the efficacy, you can try, 0.5 milligrams per day, or you can break it down even into 0.25 milligrams per day. And what I like to tell people is that something is always better than nothing. You want to take preventative measures, especially if you put in good money and you've gotten good results with a doctor. You don't want to continue to have to come back for a second hair transplant just because you failed to take hair loss medication and resulted in progressive hair loss. We have minoxidil, we have derma rolling, we even have topical finasteride for those who are suffering from adverse side effects. We have different types of shampoos. We have vitamins and supplements supposedly aid in slowing down hair loss and support hair growth. We also have something known as topical spironolactone, which I will talk in another video, as a topical that is known to slow down hair loss. These things can also help reduce side effects, especially the topical versions, but with a lower efficacy. So, like I said, something is always better than nothing. In my case, since I didn't have any, side effects from taking Finasteride, I have continued to take it, and for the most part, based on studies, a lot of people, and the majority of the people that end up taking Finasteride are not going to have any side effects. And I think the fact that I did start taking Finasteride right after my hair transplant is what helped keep my hairs, even behind the areas, you guys can't really see any forms of recession. All the hair follicles are intact, and everything's good to go right now. So the other thing is, taking hair loss medication drugs for a long time is eventually going to lower the efficacy. This is the case for most drugs out there. If you end up taking a lot of drugs long term, it's going to reduce the efficacy of the drugs, whatever you're taking. So you have to know that this is something that if you guys do end up start taking hair loss medication, it's going to have to be a long-term commitment. And the moment that you stop taking Finasteride or minoxidil or any type of hair loss medication, you are going to result in the loss of the gains or maintenance that you were actually able to achieve from taking the medication. The other thing that I did want to cover is, as you guys know, I did get married in October of 2018. So it's been almost 2 months now since I've gotten married. And so when I do decide on having kids, there's been a lot of debate as far as taking Finasteride and the fact how it can actually affect the fetus, male fetuses. And so what I plan on doing is I plan on stopping Finasteride for about a month before trying to have a baby. And I say 1 month because Finasteride has a half-life of about 5 to 7 hours. And it usually takes about anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 weeks for it to completely be out of the system from your body. This means that after 2 to 3 weeks, DHT levels are going to return to the pre-treatment levels that you guys had prior to taking Finasteride. So now to date, there has actually not been any adverse side effects when it comes to pregnancy outcomes in women who are exposed to Finasteride. But since there is a possibility theoretically, and I say theoretically because it is possible, of the risk of genital defects in male animals who were exposed to huge amounts of Finasteride due to, type 2 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, some doctors actually recommend that people who are trying to conceive, that they stop taking Finasteride temporarily. But I honestly don't think it's a big deal. But it's always better to be on the safe side. Practically, I don't think it's going to be an issue. But let me explain why I plan on stopping Finasteride temporarily for at least a month or two. Now, I say theoretically it is possible for defects to happen because Finasteride is a type 2 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. And based on research on a lot of the scientists, when there's no type 2 5-alpha reductase enzymes in the male embryo, what's going to happen is it's going to cause something known as hypospadias, which is a birth defect where the urinary tract opening is developed on the underside of the penis instead of on the tip. So it is possible. I did some digging online, and scientists did test a lot of the animals. We have rabbits, rats, monkeys, and they were exposed to huge dosages of Finasteride, anywhere from 5 to 5,000 times the normal recommended dosage for men in treating male pattern baldness, which is 1 milligram per day. And so the effects of the fetus from pregnant animals to Finasteride from semen, also as a result of direct injection of Finasteride to the rabbit uterus, equivalent to 5,000 times the normal human recommended dosage. And they actually found no abnormalities or malformations in the male fetus. Now, scientists also gave 750 times the normal recommended dosage to monkeys, and in fact, it was 750 times the highest possible dosage a woman could be exposed to through semen from a man taking 1 milligram of Finasteride per day. Now, even at this dosage, there was no abnormalities when it came to the genitals. And also, transdermal absorption of Finasteride from handling broken tablets of Finasteride did not cause any fetus defects in male babies. But, as a precaution, I don't want to, have any effects when it comes to my own kid or, anybody around me. And so this is the reason why I'm actually going to stop taking Finasteride for a little bit. Now, I don't know when I'm going to have my baby or when I plan on having it. I don't think I'm going to be planning on having a kid anytime soon, just because, I like traveling and I like doing things with my wife right now. And as much as I love kids, I think that it's going to slow down a lot of the things that I kind of wanted to get out of the way, you know, before I end up getting a kid. I don't know what's going to happen if I do end up stop taking finasteride temporarily. I don't know if it's going to result in further hair loss. I don't know if I'm going to start receding or anything like that. But since I didn't really have a severe form of hair loss even prior to me getting a hair transplant, I don't think it's going to be that bad. But since finasteride does help in lowering DHT, which in turns slow down hair loss through the type 2 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, you know, I just have to see what's going to happen once I stop taking finasteride temporarily. But like I said, I don't think anything major is going to happen just because I stopped taking finasteride for a couple weeks. Even at my 2-year post-hair transplant, I think I'm at the same density that I was even 2 years back right after the hair transplant. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys have any questions, feel free to subscribe. Leave me some comments. I know it's been a while. And my next video, I'll be talking about some hair loss, upcoming hair loss treatments, and some hair loss medications that are in the pipelines. And so if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. Talk to you guys next time. Take care.